The Constitution assigns certain powers and duties to each of the three branches of government. Only Congress has the power to make laws, and Congress isn't allowed to give its lawmaking powers away to the President, the courts, or anyone else. This principle, called the nondelegation doctrine, is essential to maintaining the separation of powers between the three branches of government. In the landmark case of United States versus Curtiss-Wright, the United States Supreme Court had to decide just how much discretion Congress could allow the President without crossing the line that separates the legislative powers from the executive and violating the non-delegation doctrine. The events of this case started in 1932, when the countries of Bolivia and Paraguay began a border war over an arid scrubland region called the Chaco Boreal. The conflict, known as the Chaco War, claimed more than 100,000 lives over the course of 3 years. Both Bolivia and Paraguay had to import all the guns and ammunition used in the war because they didn't have their own weapons manufacturers. On May 28, 1934, to encourage a ceasefire, the United States Congress passed a joint resolution outlawing the sale of weapons to countries involved in the Chaco War. But this resolution specified the ban would only go into effect if the U.S. President issued a proclamation stating that halting the sale of weapons would promote peace in the region. President Franklin Roosevelt activated the ban by proclamation that same day. The ban remained in effect until November 14, 1935, when it was revoked by a second presidential proclamation. During the ban, the Curtiss-Wright Export Corporation, a weapons manufacturer, conspired to sell 15 machine guns to Bolivia. Shortly after the ban was lifted, Curtiss-Wright was indicted in federal district court for selling the weapons. At trial, Curtiss-Wright argued that the ban on weapons sales wasn't valid because Congress had delegated its lawmaking powers to the President in violation of the Constitution. The district court held that Congress improperly delegated its lawmaking powers to the President when it passed the joint resolution, and that the ban was therefore unconstitutional. The government appealed to the Supreme Court. The issue before the court was whether Congress had effectively given its lawmaking powers to the President by allowing him to choose if and when the ban would be activated. To answer this question, the court drew a distinction between laws dealing with domestic matters and laws involving foreign policy. Justice Sutherland, writing for the majority, held that the joint resolution was constitutional. In matters involving foreign policy, Congress can allow the President extremely broad discretion over when and how to enforce law without violating the non-delegation doctrine. The court declared that the President has absolute, quote, plenary and exclusive power, unquote, over negotiations with foreign countries. Successful diplomatic negotiations often require secrecy, discretion, and caution. The court reasoned that the President often has information about foreign affairs that Congress doesn't. Therefore, the President is in a better position to make decisions about matters involving other countries. Thus, when Congress passed the joint resolution, it didn't improperly delegate its lawmaking powers to the President, but merely showed proper deference to the executive in matters involving foreign policy. The court ruled that the joint resolution was constitutional, although Justice Sutherland hinted that its decision might have been very different if the ban had dealt with domestic affairs rather than foreign policy. The court upheld the weapons ban, reversed the decision of the district court, and remanded the case for further proceedings. United States versus Curtiss-Wright Export Corp remains among the Supreme Court's strongest declarations of the President's power over international affairs and is routinely cited to bolster executive authority in the realm of foreign policy.